How do marine animals perceive their environment through sound? And how does the noise that we make as humans impact their ability to communicate with each other and navigate through their environment? These are just some of the questions that Carolyn Casey and I discuss on today's episode of Science Solutions Santa Cruz. I'm Jonathan Hicken. Enjoy. Welcome to Science Solutions Santa Cruz. We're so lucky to have Carolyn Casey in the building today. She's a research scientist with the Institute of Marine Sciences at UC Santa Cruz. And our kids are in the same kindergarten class.
That's true. It was show and tell today for Josie. Did Damien get to bring anything?
No, what did Josie bring?
Oh, just a disgusting doll that that had no clothes on, which I'm sure the teacher was really excited about.
Although Miss Jamie sent out, did you get the report cards in the mail?
No.
Okay, we just got ours in the mail.
In the physical mail?
Yeah, in the physical mail.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was like a proud dad moment.
Oh my God.
You know, because it was like,
I can't wait. Oh, I'm nervous now. I'm so nervous.
It was like, you know, Damien's a joy to have in class. He sometimes struggled to pay attention in group settings, but I was like, hey, you know what? Fair enough.
Yeah, I know. Everything that she told me about Josie, I was like, that checks. That checks. It was like, yeah, very validating.
Yeah, so shout out Bayview. You're doing a great job. Renee, Jamie, the whole staff, you guys are doing great. So.
Yes.
We also have the pleasure of working together.
That is true.
On this really, really cool project.
Yeah.
So we're launching a new exhibit in June called Seymour HQ, and it's a super cool, interactive, like responsive and up-to-date exhibit. And one of the experience in it is going to be sensing sound, an interactive experience based off of your research, a project that you're doing right now. So tell us a little bit about this project that is underway at this exact moment.
Yeah, so this project was actually funded through the Packard Foundation. So shout out to the Packard Foundation for giving us some funding.
Shout out.
For this. And essentially, you know, us in our lab, we're really concerned with the impacts of how animals are affected by sound. And we wanted to do a project that essentially evaluated something that was local, something that people could really understand and get to know, and species that they care about, particularly here. And so when we think about sound generally, you know, we know that it's kind of bad, but we don't really understand necessarily like how it changes or differs in its impact depending on the species that you're looking at, and how that actually fluctuates depending on the environment. So we kind of want to put all those pieces together. And so this project effectively looks at how an animal's communication space or listening space changes in the presence of different noise conditions in the bay. So for example, if you're a harbor seal, you're swimming around and you're listening for another harbor seal, you might be able to detect it from pretty far away under quiet conditions, maybe up to between 10 and 12 kilometers away, which sounds crazy.
That's super far away.
Super far away. But these sounds, you know, sound travels much faster underwater than it does in air. And, you know, it's a low frequency sound, so that also travels really well underwater. But in the presence of like a cruise ship, for example, that gets diminished to only 2 kilometers. And so the range at which you can detect really biologically meaningful signals really changes depending on the noise conditions. And so we partnered up with the Monterey Bay MBARI, and they provided us with some really amazing data that they've been collecting from the Bay for a really long time that characterizes the noise environment seasonally across years. And we sort of looked at like, okay, what does it mean to be a harbor seal in this environment during the summer versus the winter in terms of what it can hear, and then in the presence of some natural disturbances like wave noise and storm events, and then also some unnatural or human-induced disturbances like the presence of a cruise ship that was here several years ago. So that's kind of the general gist of the project.
Okay, so much interesting science to unpack there. Before we do, what like motivated you to pursue this, like on a personal level? What do you find personally captivating about this story?
I love thinking about animals and how they sense their environment. You know, Colleen and I, my collaborator on this project, are obsessed with this word called umwelt. And it's an animal's perceptual world, and the way that they experience it is really modified by their sensory lenses, right? And so animals have lots of different sensory lenses that they bring in information. And, from vision, we're very visual, acoustically, tactilely, and marine mammals in particular are really sensitive, and their lenses are really well adjusted to hearing. That's the major way that they communicate underwater. And so I love thinking about what it's like to actually be an animal in the environment and have that sensory lens be so important, and try to think about how it's impacted by things that we're doing or just how it changes throughout the year. And I think the really cool part of this project is that it actually incorporates a bunch of measured elements, right? So we have actual hearing data from captively trained animals that we've incorporated into this project, so that we know how well different species hear in the presence of noise. And that actually varies. Harbor seals, for example, really good at hearing. Their hearing range is really broad. They can hear across a lot of pitches or frequencies. Sorry, I talk a lot with my hands, so I'm whacking it. Whereas, killer whales, their hearing range is kind of shifted up. So they can hear well, but at higher frequencies. So that's sort of what I'm most interested in, is kind of how these different animals behave, how do they bring in information, and how they perceive the world around them, and how we're impacting that.
So I'm just imagining like being underwater as a harbor seal, which actually the game that we're developing kind of puts you in that role, which is super cool. How would you describe, like, normally when we think about Monterey Bay, we think about like how it looks as humans, right? So we, it's gorgeous in there. There are marine mammals everywhere and kelp everywhere. And so we think of it in terms of visuals. How would you describe Monterey Bay acoustically?
Yeah. So you can like imagine that you're a bottlenose dolphin, right? And then you're up at the surface and, light's penetrating, you can see some stuff, but you dive down to 50 meters, 100 meters, and then it gets dark fairly quickly, right? And then it's really, sound is the major way that you're sensing your environment, especially for a dolphin that echolocates, right? They can literally see with sound. In terms of the things that they're listening for, there's lots of, snapping shrimp that are like incredibly loud. That are, yeah, exactly. And then there are other animals that are producing sound. Humpback whales, blue whales, fin whales, all frequent Monterey Bay, and they produce these very low frequency sounds that we can't hear, but other animals can hear.
Like if we were underwater, we would not be able to hear.
We would likely not be able to hear them because they're really, most of them are below our range of hearing. I mean, humpback whale song you can certainly hear, but a blue whale sound, most of it is below the lower end of our hearing capabilities, and so you have to speed it up in order to hear it when you're listening to it after a recording. Actually,
speaking of Mbari, they have a bunch of these sounds, and one time we were testing in Seymour Center. We were testing a sound experience, and so we put this big speaker and a big subwoofer.
Yeah. With John Ryan.
Yes, with John Ryan. Yeah. Shout out John Ryan.
I love John Ryan. He's a collaborator on this project.
He gave us the exhibit to play with, and we put it in the exhibit hall, which Seymour Center is like largely concrete.
Yeah. Oh, I bet that just like
it just shook the building. Like
That's
visitors
so cool.
thought that there was like a jet flying by. Yeah, it was kind of spooky. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
Yeah, no, but it's a really powerful
sound.
So those sounds are going on, and then you have biological sound, the sound of waves crashing at the water surface. If it's raining, that actually produces quite a bit of sound. And then of course you have whatever humans are introducing into the environment. So that could be pleasure boats that are going by that produce predominantly low frequency sounds, whale watching vessels. And in the case, at least, not really anymore, but historically, large cruise ships have been allowed to come into Monterey Bay up until relatively recently. And if you go further offshore, then you might experience these large, huge cargo container ships that are producing sounds through the cavitation of their propellers. So it's really dynamic. And that's what we wanted to highlight in this project. When we think about like what animals hear, we think of like an animal just sitting outside listening for a sound. But really it changes, right? Like depending on the day or the time of year, the season, or what's happening in environment. And that's what we wanted to showcase in this game, is that like it's variable. It's a dynamic listening environment for these animals.
All right, let's geek out a little bit on how you're actually doing the research here. So you mentioned a minute ago that you're working with Mbari and they've got some sound monitoring. But how does one actually understand how, say, a seal hears and how it's going to impact their behavior?
I won't get into like the nitty gritty of the equations because I don't think anybody's going to really like that. But first, you need to know how loud the sound is, right? So if you wanted to model like how far is your voice, John, going to travel in this environment? You need to know, and how, at what point can I no longer detect it anymore? You would need to know how loud your voice is. So Jonathan's voice happens to be very loud as far as humans go.
That is not the first time I've heard that.
The source level of your voice is high. So, it goes pretty far. in, these quiet conditions. But you also need to know something about the listening or the hearing capabilities in the presence of noise of humans. Like, at which point can I no longer detect a signal in the presence of noise? And that really has to only be done in the laboratory. And that's why this project is so cool, because we have all this information available. We actually measured and know how loud killer whale sounds are, harbor seal sounds are, rockfish sounds are. We've measured the source level or the level of it. And then we're pairing that with the hearing capabilities of the receivers, right? So like in my human example, you can actually calculate at what level in terms of decibels that sound will no longer be detected. And then you need to also know something about how loud it is in the environment, which is called the ambient noise. And then ideally, if you are like a hardcore, bioacoustician, then you would do a lot of like propagation modeling, because the way sound travels in here in this beautiful room that you've created is a lot better, or is more predictable than how it travels underwater in a submarine canyon or near the water surface, because you have refractive elements, the sound's bouncing up off the top of the surface of the water and, traveling this way and that way, and maybe gets absorbed in this type of sediment, but not that. And so it can be very complex, but the root of it is about propagation loss, how sound kind of degrades as it travels away from a source, the hearing capabilities of the receiver, how loud the signal is at the beginning, and the ambient noise. Those are the kind of elements that we put together in this. And we had a lot of collaborators. So we have folks at NOAA who supplied us with the killer whale vocalizations that are used in this experience. Folks at Monterey provided us with the ambient noise recordings. And then we had a lot of existing data that was already published. So we were like, all this happens. There was no field work. We just wanted to put it together. And a major part of the project was partnering with you guys to showcase it and share it in a way that people understand and find interesting and valuable. So that was, I would say, half of the project was the sciencey part, and the other half was like the human interpretation part.
And so let's see. So you mentioned obviously working with Seymour Center and all of the tens of thousands of folks who come through here every year, but I understand that you're not stopping there when it comes to sort of the way that you're using the results of this project to educate people, right?
No, I mean, we had a letter of support from Robert Mazurek from CMSF, who said we would love some of this information to be able to use it for our Blue Whales, Blue Skies initiative. So Jesse Kendallbar, who's really been like the lead in terms of like the production of this really cool visualization, has made it so that we can implement it here in the Seymour Center and share it here, but we can also transfer it to other educational forums and share it more broadly across like, NOAA or the Discovery of Sound in the Sea, the DOSITS program, or the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation, or all of these different entities that we will be able to share this information with. So we hope anybody who wants to use this, they can have, access to it.
So you said Robert Mazurek from CMSF. That's the California Marine Sanctuary Foundation.
Yes.
They're an incredible group. In fact, Jess is going to be coming on the show.
No way. Awesome.
Yeah. I'll ask her some follow-ups about this.
Yes, please do.
So you're a scientist through and through, but you also wear this hat as an educator. And I want to ask you about the California Ocean Alliance in a second. But when you think about putting together scientific proposals, how are you sort of like strategizing the science and the education, and what are funders looking for when it comes to the blend of these things? And has that changed over time since your career started?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I would say that for every project that we put together, there is always a broader impact. There's always an outreach element. And that part to me is like incredibly important. And I think to most researchers it is, but like, I think coming up with these different creative ways to share the information, because you can sit in your little ivory tower and do your like research and tap away at your computer and publish in scientific articles that nobody reads. I mean, the vast majority of people do not read scientific publications on the reg, right? And so it's like, what does it all matter? What I'm doing every day and spending my time doing if most people don't know about it? And the purpose of the work that I do is to inspire people to care about animals, about this environment that we live in specifically. And whether it's about, finding out just cool stuff like wow facts about the animals that are around us that we didn't know before, that's kind of my jam, like revealing the secret lives of seals and sort of how they operate and what they do. or if there's a real conservation element. None of it matters if you don't get people involved in it. And so in terms of, there's always been that ask, I think, from funding agencies. I think right now it's a really difficult time getting grants and applying for grants. And from the typical places where we've looked for funding from, like the National Science Foundation, for example, their priorities unfortunately have shifted because the funding landscape is very different right now.
Sure.
But I think scientists have been primed now. I mean, over my career, it has become such an important element of it that you're always looking for it. And I think the strength of this project is like there was an actual outlet. So you can write all these fancy things like, yeah, I'm going to share it publicly. I'm going to do public seminars. But unless you have like a tangible way and a plan, that's less attractive than actually, than saying like, yeah, I'm just going to share it generally.
I heard you say that you're personally motivated by getting people excited about animals and the ecosystems and stuff. Where did that actually start for you? Can you pinpoint a moment in your life or in your career where you were like, this is it? Like, this is the thing for me?
I mean, I don't know if you know this, but I was an educator here at the Seymour Center. That's like how I started.
Wait a second.
I started in the youth education program in my undergrad.
Dang. Okay.
Yeah.
How did I not know that?
Yeah, I was a volunteer. And then I went on a tour during Ocean Explorers because I was like a guest instructor in Ocean Explorers or an assistant or whatever.
That's our summer camp.
Yes, yeah. And then I went over to the Pinniped Lab and I was like, whoa, this is cool. and so I started volunteering there. And then, the rest is history. I've been here since then. But I always loved educating. That's always been a huge part. I think I was an educator first and then became a scientist because I fell in love with the process. But I think I've always been someone who's loved teaching, and teaching is sort of like acting, and I've always loved acting. I also am a lecturer here in the Ecology and Evolutionary Biology department at UCSC, and when I get up in front of students, it's almost just like, yeah, I'm like performing a part. I'm sharing and I'm trying to get people really excited. And that's it. It feels like performative and exciting. And yeah, so I think it's always just been a part of me. I can't pinpoint the exact moment, but I know I've always been, ever since I've started professionally, that's what I've been doing. And then science got mixed into it. And that's something that I've tried to carry in my career, like science alongside education the whole way.
So you run or collaboratively run a nonprofit called California Ocean Alliance. How did that actually start? And what was the sort of the inspiration for that?
Yeah. So many people within the science community, work with one another very closely. And so I actually, have been working with Robert Mazurek, Brandon Southall, who's a researcher here in IMS and owns his own company, Ari Friedlander, who I'm also married to. We were all sitting around and we were like, man, it's fun to do science, but we want to do something that actually impacts like the local community here. We want to connect more with the local community because a lot of our projects were in the Antarctic or in Southern California, or in Mexico or in all these beautiful, great places, but we weren't doing a lot right here. And we wanted to also be able to start education programs here that we could share our science with. And so we started California Ocean Alliance in 2019. I think it was officially incorporated, maybe 17. I'll have to date check that. And it's just a small group. It's always been a small group of scientists who have other positions, but we come together on different projects. And I took the education lead. So I'm technically the director of education. And we offer a lot of different programming. And what's unique about it and cool about it is that it's scientists who are teaching all the classes. And so we try to share what we do because it's so cool with the general public in as many ways and teach them how to also do it and get them excited about the things that we're excited about. So we do summer programs for high school students, adult learning programs that we offer. And we also do internships, like paid internship opportunities. So it really runs the gamut. It's been a lot of fun and a really nice complementary portion to like my mostly other science jobs.
If you haven't visited the Seymour Marine Discovery Center at UC Santa Cruz in a while, or ever, you really should come visit us. We are right on the bluffs of the beautiful Monterey Bay, with an aquarium full of local species and a bunch of hands-on science exhibits that help you understand what's happening in our ocean and along our coast. We are connecting the incredible research happening at UC Santa Cruz with real-world solutions for our coastal community. We don't want science to just sit on a shelf. We want it to shape decisions, inspire kids, and help our community feel equipped to act. So if you care about the future of our ocean and our coastal community, or you just want to experience a place that makes you feel a little more connected to it, come visit us at the Seymour Marine Discovery Center. Science, Solutions, Santa Cruz. It's so interesting, right? Because we're following this sort of Science, Solutions, Santa Cruz mantra. That's the name of the show. It's also sort of the three pillars that we follow as a staff and everything we do.
Yeah.
And part of the motivation is to really serve this community and be highly relevant to what we care about as a community and some of the issues and conversations that we're undertaking as a community. Sounds like you went through a similar sort of like transformation or a thought process where you're like, I want my work to matter here at home. That seems to be, I'm hearing this from a lot of people who want their work to be hyper relevant. I don't know if it's just because we're having kids and now we're like more embedded in the community, or there's an overall industry shift to wanting to serve the community. But why was it that you were like, I want to serve my home?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I'll answer it and then I'll turn it back on you.
Yeah. Please.
Because I'd like to hear your answer. I mean, I think having and starting a family obviously is a big part of it. I think that when you look, I think you kind of become habituated to how amazing this place is. You get used to it. You're like, okay, I've been here for a really long time. And then I think like one day I woke up and I was like, wait, this is an incredible ecosystem. We have more marine mammal species here than we do in lots of other locations around the world. Do people know that? Like, do we know that this is a really pristine environment? This is an environment that like other people look to model after in terms of like the regulations that are in place here to protect the sanctuary. And I think that, as you get older, you start to look around and you're just like, what am I doing that actually matters?
Yeah.
I think that's like was also a big part of it. Like, am I having an effect on the people who are around me in the way that I want to be doing that? And I think by starting COA, that was our chance to actually have that impact and create, I know it sounds cheesy, but like a legacy for the people who are a part of this community. And I love Santa Cruz. I mean, I think it has like the perfect combination of science and research and culture and all of these things that come together in this like really unique way. And I wanted to be a part of it. And I wasn't by working just exclusively at UCSC as a researcher. But what about you? Like, why did you want it?
Yeah. So, when I moved to Santa Cruz in 2013, I was working in tech. So I was commuting over the hill every day. And I was doing that for a couple of years. I put on 30 pounds and, I was just like miserable and feeling super disconnected. It was like Santa Cruz was a place where I slept.
Yeah.
And my life was over in Silicon Valley. And I happened upon the Santa Cruz Museum of Art and History in downtown Santa Cruz, and there was a bike festival going on, and I was like, what the hell is this? Like a museum doing a bike festival? I never thought of myself as a museum guy. Anyway, one thing led to another, and I started working there under Nina Simon at the time. And it just absolutely blew my mind, the impact on me, which I wasn't expecting, to be working in my own community, creating a space, creating experiences, creating connectivity, going home at the end of the day and feeling like I'm cultivating this experience, not just for myself and my own experience in this community, but for others. And that was so fulfilling. And then when I had a kid in 2019, it was like, and then the pandemic, like right after that, the all of that just hammered home for me that one of my core values as a human, as like a person in this world, is community. And that can mean, different sizes, different scales. But, for me, being a part of Santa Cruz is a fundamental sort of value that I'm also trying to pass on to my kid. But it is such a fulfilling thing. And I feel like when I leave this earth someday, I want to feel like, I did my part to make Santa Cruz great. So that's a little bit about why it matters to me.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I think like science in and of itself can have a lot of barriers, right? I mean, there are institutional barriers, and then there's also a lot of people don't think of themselves as doing that. I certainly didn't. When I was an undergrad, I was, goofing off in environmental studies, and I was like, maybe I'll work for a nonprofit. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I never thought I would get my PhD. And I did it, and not the degree didn't change my life, but the people that I worked with, like that, the community of people here at the university that I work with are still like my family. And it completely changed my life's trajectory. I met my husband through it. I started everything just kind of snowballed after that. And so when you talk about legacy, it's like, I want to break down that wall that people think is in place there that, separates scientists from everybody else. And I want people to think that they can become scientists. And that's why our high school program, we're specifically targeting a lot of people who don't have a background in science at all. And the scientists are working directly with them to say, like, these are the things that I know. This is how you get into the field. And we act as mentors after the program's over. We write letters of recommendation. We check in on them. A lot of them, I'm taking you'll get a kick out of this. I'm trying to take a graduate student right now in the Ocean Sciences Department who is an ocean explorer at the Seymour Center, and then was one of our first participants in the Marine Mammal Scientist in Training program within COA, and then became a volunteer in Colleen's lab after that, and now is hopefully going to go. Hannah Jackson. I think you guys did a story on her before.
Hannah.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So it's just like this crazy. So anyway, when you're talking about community, I'm like, yes, I want people to be a part of it. I don't want there to be this barrier. I want it to be like more fluid.
So let's do that right now, and kind of linking it back to your study. When you think about what you've been working on, whether in the study or sort of the peripheral edges of it, what is something that you want everybody in this community to know about sound and communication spaces of our marine animals?
Yeah, I mean, really basically, I think I want people to know sound's really important to animals. We don't think about sound as often as we think about vision. Most of us, some of us are reliant exclusively on sound, but most of us rely a lot on vision. So I want to orient people to the soundscape of their lives first. And then for other people, for people to realize that other animals are highly dependent on sound. That's number one. Sound's cool and important for animals, especially animals that live underwater. And then two, I want people to know that different animals perceive sound differently, right? Like not all animals are sensitive to, the echolocation clicks of a porpoise. Not all animals can hear that. And I think that's really interesting because it gets back to this concept of Umwelt, right? Like all these animals have their different sensory lenses that are specially adjusted for what they need to do in their environment. And then third, I think, that I want people to realize that there are certain things that happen within Monterey Bay that can have an impact and change an animal's ability to hear. And when they're listening, they're not just listening for fun. They're trying to find mates. They're trying to detect potential predators. They're trying to maybe find food. And so it's a really biologically important thing that they're trying to do. And there are certain things that humans do that impact it.
What are some of those things?
Okay. So, I mean, not here because I don't think jet skis are allowed anymore. You can confirm that.
Confirmed.
Okay. But, jet skis are incredibly loud and just obnoxious. Small boats, tend to have an impact in terms of contribution to the soundscape. But really like these large cruise ships, which as I mentioned, are no longer, they can come into Monterey Bay, but they can't anchor at Monterey Bay, or they can anchor, but they can't let passengers off. Sorry. And so it makes it logistically very challenging.
Yeah, they don't do it very
ships.
Often.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
But those ships can be extremely loud. And if their motors are running and the propellers are going, it can be really impactful. It's acute. It's not forever. But imagine you're in a restaurant and you hear this incredibly loud noise that makes it really difficult for you to talk to your partner. You might be able to endure it and just talk louder for a little bit longer, right? And that has a metabolic cost, right? It's not easy to talk loud for a prolonged period of time.
Yeah, like
right?
you got to really get your brain engaged.
Your voice might get hoarse,
Yep.
and you're actually burning more calories. There's been studies done actually here at the lab on bottlenose dolphins. If you have to elevate your voice for a prolonged period of time, you're actually burning a lot of some calories doing that. Yeah. Way to, if you just talk more, you can burn a lot of calories most of the time, Jonathan.
Part of my fitness routine here is just simply talking.
Exactly. But then an animal might leave after a while. If you're at a restaurant, it's consistently loud. You might be like, man, I don't want to eat at that restaurant anymore.
Yeah.
But that might be a really important foraging restaurant for like these dolphins. And so there are, I think, like support for legislation or for initiatives like the Blue Whale Blue Skies initiative that the California Marine Sanctuary Foundation has put in place and is really important. I think there are policies that people are working on right now that directly impact, decreasing the noise that we present into the soundscape that makes like the detection of these sounds for these animals more possible.
So we'll have Jess Morton on and
Great.
we'll get deeply into this project and stuff, but can you just describe like the basics of what that initiative is?
Yeah, so all across the United States, there have been different types of initiatives that have tried to incentivize different shipping companies basically to voluntarily reduce their speed. And so in some biologically important areas, like, the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary, reducing to, I think it's less than 10 knots while you're in the area. And that can have a significant impact in the amount of sound that is actually introduced. So I think I just read a statistic that if you reduce to 10 knots, you can decrease the overall noise production by like 40 or 50% from your vessel.
Wow.
So it's not insignificant. Also, you're cutting emissions, the likelihood of ship strikes, which are a major cause of mortality for a lot of large whales, decreases. And so that's the gist of it. It's trying to incentivize these different shipping companies to be a part of the Blue Whale Blue Skies initiative. They get street cred for being like environmentally friendly. And then, there's an environmental impact that's positive.
So the idea here is okay, we can imagine one of these giant shipping vessels with like thousands
all
of
our
those
Amazon
containers.
orders.
Yeah. Coming in, they're coming in towards probably San Francisco is the closest port for us.
Yeah.
And this initiative is saying, okay, can y'all like choose to reduce your speed?
Yes.
And if they do so, it reduces the sound underwater. Like
Yeah.
you said, it reduces the emissions. It reduces the chance of whale strikes. Right.
Yeah.
This is the idea. How does it work? The data that you're collecting, whether it's this project or other similar ones, how do you work with like a nonprofit like that?
Yeah. So this will be the first time that like I have actually worked with a nonprofit like CMSF. And initially, Robert wrote this letter of support saying to the Packard Foundation saying like, yeah, this is important. And I think there's a few different ways. I think that we could write a report that is accessible to the shipping companies, trying to explain sort of like how different events like the presence of ships, impacts different marine mammals and how it reduces their listening space as just like a pamphlet or source of information that can help as part of the incentivization process. But yeah, to be honest, I don't know. Like Robert and I need to sit down and really like hammer out like what of this is useful, what can we use, how can we sort of package it to be most informative to you. So I'm excited about that process.
So when I imagine, like thought experiment here, right? Let's say we're not successful at reducing sound underwater, right? And it's really loud, whether it's the ships or shipping vessels or cruise ships, or there's this proposal to do oil drilling up and down the California coast. I imagine that's really loud. What is this actually like the downstream impacts on these animals that you're studying? Sort of what's the sort of broader implication of loud sounds?
It varies, right? So what we've been talking about this whole time is just like, can you hear the sound? So like you and I can be far away from one another, right? And I can be listening for you. I can be concentrating really hard. And I can tell you like, oh yeah, okay, I heard Jonathan talk. The message encoded in what you're saying, in order for me to like know what the information is that you've said to me, it actually has to be a little bit quieter. Like you can detect a sound, but in order to know and decode the signal, it needs the background noise needs to be even quieter.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right? Like, because think about it. If you and I were yelling at each other across the parking lot outside, and I was like, you'd be like, yes, she's
Carolyn's
talking to
here.
me. I detect a signal.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. Yeah.
But you wouldn't be able to tell me what I was saying.
Yeah,
right?
sure.
You would,
Okay.
You would need it to be
Yeah.
extremely quiet, or I would need to be louder for you to be able to.
Sure.
So there's that. There's like animals not only need to be able to detect the signal, they need to be able to decode it. And we still don't have a lot of information and modeling about like what that, communication space is for
Cool.
animals.
Yeah.
So that's a sidebar. In terms of like long stream effects, you can have animals that, like we mentioned, are just have a startle response, right? Like that there's a loud sound. Let's say like there's an air gun that goes off as part of like, oil and gas exploration outside of the sanctuary somewhere. Big explosion, that causes a temporary increase in stress cortisol. Maybe they temporarily leave an area. In certain cases, deep diving animals especially are susceptible because if you're like a mammal, like a beaked whale, one of these like freaky dolphins that like go down super deep and look weird and have teeth going all which way around their head. I find beaked whales so weird. They're spending like sometimes up to an hour diving really deep, like over 1,000 meters. So you're down there, you hear a startling sound. You're a mammal, you need air. What do?
Come back to the surface.
Yeah, go up to the surface. Well, for those of you who are divers, right, you can't come to the surface too quickly. And so you can have, detrimental bodily effects from being startled and coming to the surface too quickly. So you can get animals, potentially could get the bends. Those are very acute. Long term, if animals stop foraging in a potentially highly productive area because there is a lot of noise in that area, then it's like, okay, there's maybe decreased success rate for females in terms of their ability to gestate offspring, right? They're not getting enough food on board, and so they don't carry their offspring to, the end and deliver and then, continue the population growth. And so you can have these major population consequences if animals are permanently abandoning sites that are really loud.
This strikes me, I'm comparing this to sort of a natural state, sort of an Eden state Monterey Bay with no human activity, right? There's, imagining there's no ships and there's no oil drilling or whatever.
Yeah.
And are there natural loud sounds that are happening regardless of human activity? I mean, you mentioned rain and waves and stuff like that, but, and shrimp, but...
Earthquakes,
okay. Earthquakes make sound. What
Yeah.
else? What else is going to produce a loud sound naturally?
I mean, like if you're in the Arctic or the Antarctic, maybe like ice cavitation. There's a lot of natural noise coming from like icebergs, like coming together and breaking apart.
Yeah.
But here, like the Monterey Bay is pretty quiet. Like I will say that I think generally speaking, and John Ryan can check me on this, like I think we're doing a pretty good job in the sanctuary in terms of like maintaining this pristine soundscape. But there aren't like these like really acute loud sounds that are persistently happening in this environment.
So human activity really is an outlier when it comes to the sounds.
I think so. Yeah. And imagine like these animals have been in the ocean, like whales have been in the ocean for 50 million years. They have evolved to recognize the sound of rain and be like, there's some rain, or even like storm events. That's just part of like us going outside and being used to wind or rain noise ourselves. But like, the advent of human generated sound is really recent. And so animals haven't had time to evolve like an appropriate response necessarily to those sound types. And so a lot of times it invokes probably a fear response, or, they get used to it. Animals are really resilient too. It's not like, you play a sound and they're dead. they can get used to a sound, but it does impact this communication space, right? And so yeah, I don't think that there's anything as acute as human generated sound that they've evolved to be able to tolerate.
So when you think back to when you started this work with acoustics and hearing and sound communication spaces, is there anything that has surprised you in what you've learned along the way, or is there anything that you've gotten wrong?
We're constantly wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, we're
that's the beauty of science, right?
Yeah, we're constantly like checking and rechecking. I mean, even for this project, we're trying to do these like very systematic measurements. And I'll say that I should have started with this. This is not just me. Colleen Reichmuth, who is working here at the Marine Lab, and my colleague Jillian Sills, we've worked like completely together on this project. And Jillian and I will be like working on Zoom, doing these calculations, and we're just like, okay, is this right? And we're tweaking it, and then we put something together and we're like, no, that doesn't seem right. And we go back and we do our calculations. So it's just like always this attenuation and repositioning of our effort on that. In terms of like big science things that I have gotten wrong, that I've put out, that I've had to retract, fortunately, I haven't done that yet.
Yeah. Has there anything? Has anything surprised you along the way?
Yeah.
That, like a finding or something in the data or anything that's just sort of like caught you by surprise.
I mean, I feel like I still can't wrap around my head. And obviously, like, these absolute distances are, you can improve them by doing these like refined propagation estimates. But the fact that a harbor seal can hear another harbor seal from 12 kilometers away, I'm still just like, is that real? Like, we've talked to people down at the Naval Postgraduate School and been like, can this like happen in these environments? And like, yeah, more or less, so that's super surprising that animals can hear each other at such great distances. I'm still just like, I can't wrap my head around that. So that was surprising for sure. Some of the distances that we calculated, we were like, wait, is this real?
And that's like basically like someone in Aptos being able to hear us right now.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a crazy distance.
And that's just because sound moves and travels differently underwater, right?
Yeah, like sound underwater travels 1,500 meters per second. So my voice right now, even if I'm talking at this level, is going to go astronomically further than it does in air if I was saying this stuff underwater. In air, it's like 340 meters per second. Underwater, 1,500 meters per second. So it's boom, it's going. And then also, if you're talking about low frequency sound, the sound waves are longer, so they can travel further underwater. That's why blue whales, I mean, they can communicate across ocean basins. What we think of, another thing that I find fascinating is like we think of like our communication space is, maybe filling up this building or this room or Santa Cruz if you're, a harbor seal. Blue whales, we're talking across like huge distances that they potentially are talking to one another. And that's their Umwelt, right? Like that is what they are used to doing, they've evolved to do, but it's something that I have a really hard time like just thinking about. It's sort of like space for me. Like I don't understand space. I sometimes think about black holes. I'm like, how is that possible? That's sort of where I'm at with the blue whale communication space. Just like, that's incredible.
Yeah, we got to get an astrophysicist on here to talk. Yeah.
Can I come and just listen?
Yes, you can. You can sit where Carrie is right
That'd
now.
be awesome.
Yeah, just
I
be in
would
the
love
room.
that.
Yeah, shout out Carrie, science communication, the intern in the house. Thank you, Carrie.
Yeah, thanks, Carrie. Make me look good.
All right, Carolyn. Well, thank you so much. I mean, there's so much to pack here. Is there anything you want to plug, or is there anything that you really want to share before we wrap up for the day?
No, I just want to thank you guys for putting the visualization component together. I came to Jonathan and I was like, I have this project, I need an outlet, and this was like the perfect synergy of science and education. So I'm really grateful that worked out. I'm really grateful to Jesse for making a really cool game. I hope folks come and interact with this exhibit when it opens. And yeah, just to my collaborators and people at Mbari and at NOAA who provided us with a ton of data. So that's it.
Well, that is Carolyn's talking about Seymour HQ. It's a new exhibit coming to the Seymour Center, opening in June. Stay subscribe to the newsletter. We'll get you dates and everything about when that's going to open. Carolyn Casey, research scientist at the Institute of Marine Sciences here at UC Santa Cruz. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.